Hello everyone, it's June from Artsy Lolico, and today I will show you a step-by-step tutorial on how to create this adorable flower hedgehog here on Procreate using our very own custom-made brushes created by me. I crafted 16 brushes and 3 unique texture canvases that are going to be available on Etsy for you to purchase. The sketch is going to be available for free, including the color palettes. Both links are going to be down below. If you do find this tutorial helpful, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notifications so you don't miss a thing. So let's not waste time, grab your iPad and open up your Procreate and let's get started. For this painting, I'll be using the Ridged Small canvas. To begin, we're going to start with the hedgehog first, and we're going to paint the body of the hedgehog. And to start off with the inside of the body, we're going to use a very light white tone with a touch of gray. Right now we have the sketch at the bottom, but we're going to create a new layer on top of that sketch underneath the watercolor texture canvas. And we're going to start using the wet on dry brush first. And we're going to keep the size to 100% with the opacity as well. And we're going to fill the inside of the hedgehog first and just follow along just like this. Don't worry about the eyes, we'll paint over them on top. But focus on just filling the area of the inside with the light gray tone. And when you get a little bit closer to the edges, put a little bit less pressure to get a bit more precise. You don't have to be so perfect, but just enough to cover off the sides and the corners of the hedgehog. And there you go. Before moving on, we're going to paint the face now. So we're going to create a new layer. And we're going to pick a black color and use a fine line brush now. Now we're going to reduce the size to around 15% with a 100% opacity. And start with the little smile of the hedgehog and just follow along the sketch just like this. Leaving some of the empty spaces in the eyes to give a little bit of light reflection. And now we're going to paint the nose. Now, we are going to paint the inside of the nose darkest, and then we'll use the light colors around it. Now for the rest of the nose, we're going to use the wet on dry brush, and we're going to reduce the size to around 10%. And we're going to pick a lighter gray tone area, just like this, and fill in the top corner to give a bit more value and the light reflection from the top. Now once that's done, we're going to go now a bit darker and fill the rest of the nose just like this. Now I'm going to go over a little bit layer on top of that to make it a bit darker, but leaving a little bit of the nose at the bottom, the holes here, a little bit lighter to give a little bit more texture and value there. Now we're going to pick a light brown color, and we're going to create a new layer underneath the eyes and the nose and the mouth. And we're going to pick the smooth brush and keep the size to around 15%. And now we're going to paint the mask of the hedgehog, which are the darker furs surrounding the eyes for protection and camouflage. And I liked using the smooth brush because, first of all, it's very smooth, easy to use, with no hard edges, very easy to blend, but also gives that nice watercolor effect of a real paintbrush, as less pressure applies more paint on the canvas, but more pressure from the Apple Pencil gives a bit more of transparent colors of the paint. And just remember, nothing is set in stone. You can use your own brushes throughout this painting process, and as well as your own colors, and that's the beauty of it. Now we're going to create a new layer and pick an orange tone to fill the cheeks. And now we're going to paint the ears. Now we're going to use the same dark brown color that we used of the face mask. And just paint just like this the ears, the inside. And now we're going to move on with the hands and the feet. And we're going to pick a very light tone pink color. And again, we're using this smooth brush and just fill the hands just like this. And now we're going to use a bit mid-tone color to give a little bit more value here. And we're going to glaze over the bottom of the feet where the fur might be a little bit darker. Just like this, and the feet at the top because the shadows of the hedgehog is covering the feet a bit more. And as well as adding some texture colors here on the angles. And now we're going to start painting the spikes of the hedgehog, also known as quills. And this is one of my favorite parts of this part of the painting. And we're going to start off with the same skin tone that we used. We're going to keep the size to around 45%. And we're going to get progressively darker. We're going to use the gouache brush. And we're going to create a new layer on top of everything else we have. Now zoom in a bit, and now we're going to start. And just all we're going to do is put a little bit more pressure when we start and taper off at the end. And the gouache brush also tapers off itself, so you don't have to worry too much. But it's important to put a bit more pressure in the beginning and kind of taper off with less pressure at the end, just like this. And we're going to give some open space for darker tones to go in as well. So evenly distribute the spikes just like this. And don't have to be so perfect, and you can use different colors. And now we're going to use a mid-tone color like this, a little bit darker than we had before, and then we're going to go clockwise again, filling up the spaces that we had before, just like this. And feel free to pause the video if you can, if you're having difficulties following along. And now we're going to go with the darkest tone that we have here. And again, we're going to go counterclockwise. It doesn't really matter which way you go, but I prefer going the other way around and coming back around, just to see if the spots that need to be filled again. And I explained through my previous videos the reason why I put light, midtones, and dark tones throughout my paintings. mainly because it creates a lot of value and depth, which is very easy to do, but also makes the painting a bit more complex and a lot more intricate at the same time. Now I want to fill up the quill area with the same color that we used with the skin tone. And we're going to use a wet on dry brush. And we're going to create a new layer underneath the hedgehog spikes quills. And we're going to keep the size to around 45%. And we're going to go around and fill up all the areas, just like this. Adding this simple background will give a much more fuller effect without distracting the viewer's experience. Now we're going to add a little bit more details to the bottom of the shadows here. We're going to create a new layer and use the wet on dry brush, and we're going to use a dark blue tone, and we're going to keep the size to around 25%, but we're going to reduce the opacity on the layers tab to around 15 to 12%. And we're going to create some shadows underneath the chin, the bottom part of the hedgehog, of the belly, to get more value from the shadows that we had before. And just like this, we're going to fill up the areas at the bottom here. And we're also going to paint the underneath the chin now. And I painted underneath the eyes to get more of that cheek reflection and deepness of the eyes as well as underneath the nose, as well underneath the mouth. Simply adding these small textures around the face and the hedgehog itself creates a lot more complexity and enhances the painting altogether. I'm going to go around it on the corners to add a little bit more texture feeling on the side. Now we're almost done with the hedgehog. And now we're going to start combining everything that we have that we painted, except for the eyes, to prevent any smudging on the eyes. But we're going to start blending now and use the moving blender, and we're going to keep the size to around 15%. And we're going to start blending the shadows just like this, with a wiggly line, blending it just like this. And you don't want to put too much pressure. You also want to keep some of the lines of the hard edges to give that realistic watercolor effect without mixing in too much colors. And now we're going to use the gouache brush on the gouache layer on top of everything we have, and use a white tone color with the gouache brush now. And the reason why I use the gouache layer, which is on top of every other watercolor canvas, is that it's a lot more opaque and stands out rather than mixing in with the watercolor texture look. We're going to keep the size to around 30%. And we're going to start painting the ears, the outside of the lip of the ears, to give more contrast between the hedgehog and the quills of the hedgehog. And we're going to move on to the body as well, adding a little bit more spikes in the body with some white textures of the fur coming out as well. We can just go around by adding some white textures of lines just like this. And it's okay to layer on top of every other paintings that we did with the gouache brush. And we actually want that because the white fur of the hedgehog is going to be more forward in front of every other layers that we use on the hedgehog. Now, since we added the white tone, we're going to add a little bit more dark tone as well, which is kind of a bluish gray tone into the fur to give more texture. Just like this. Just lines throughout the body. Just like how fur would look like, but without adding all the details into the body. And I want to keep this painting not too intricate, simple, and easy to do. Now you can go to the Layers tab and remove the sketch to see your preview of the finished product of the hedgehog. You can turn it back on because now we're going to finish the top of the flower. And for this painting, I used a very light pink color for the flower as it gives a bit more contrast to the hedgehog. And we're going to start with the wet on dry brush and keeping the size to around 30%. And we're going to create this layer that we have on top of everything we painted. And we're just going to fill up the flower with all the paint that we have here, just like this. Layer by layer with petal by petal. And you could experiment with different types of flowers and different colors of the petals as well. And again, the wet on dry brush is perfect for petals as it gives a nice hard edge, just like watercolor style. And now we're going to create a new layer and we're going to add a little bit more darker tone. And now we're going to add some mid-tone colors. Now I think the light is coming from the top right corner, so I'm going to put a bit more mid-tones on the left side and as well as the bottom and the middle of the flower to give more depth from the perspective of the painter. And we're going to add a little bit more yellow with orangey tone on the petals. So the same brush, we're going to layer on top of it just like this. Nothing too crazy, just put it on the petals and we're going to blend them smoothly and mix in very well. I preferably put it in the middle of the petals because when I mix it, it's going to mix very well throughout the colors of the darker tone and the mid-tones and the light tones. And now we're going to paint the middle of the flower with a bit more bright yellow, just like this. Use the same brush that we had and just go around in a little circle area, just like this. Being a bit more precise in the corners so we don't go over the layers here. And we're going to create a new layer and add a bit more mid-tone color to the flower as well. And again, like I said, the shadow is going to be on the left side because the light is coming from the top right corner. So, just like this. And now we're going to start blending the flower, but we're going to pinch them, but separate the flower petals and the yellow middle part of the flower. And we're going to use the moving blender to around 20 to 15%. And just wiggle around just like this, mixing the colors smoothly. And I like to pull the pigment out from the darker tones to the lighter tones to give that realistic feel of watercolor on actual real flower petals, where the layers of the pigment are coming out from the darker tones to the tip of the petals. And if you feel like the brush is mixing in too much, you can reduce the size at any time, or bigger whenever you feel like. And now pick the middle part of the flower now, and then blend that as well. And now create a new layer, and we're going to add a little bit darker tones in the middle of the flower, also known as the pistils of the flower. Keep the size to around 15%, and just follow along just like this with the sketches that I provided. You could add or put less dots like that, but it's up to you on your preference if you want to add more or less. And that's the beauty part of Procreate and digital art, is you can take or remove at any time without messing up the entire painting, and experiment whatever you like to see more. And now we're going to go back to the gouache layer again and use the gouache brush. And pick the size to around 10%. And we're going to add some light reflections on the top of the flower petals, just like this, where the light is coming from. Just a tip here, we're going to be adding some white here. And now we're going to add some shadows. So we're going to go to the bottom of the layers that we have. Use, again, the dark blue tone color. And use the wet on dry brush. And we're going to reduce the opacity around to 15%. And the size to around 20%. And just fill out the bottom part just like this. Adding small details like the shadows like this brings the painter's eye or the viewer's eye to the middle. And now we're going to remove the washi tape. So go to your layers tab and go to the tape that we have and pick an eraser that is big enough. I use the generic oil paint that comes with Procreate and use a large enough brush size, and then start from the top, and just like this, we're going to erase. And there you have it. Beautiful, adorable hedgehog with a flower on the top. Super excited for the spring. If you enjoyed this tutorial, please comment and like and share. And as always, have a wonderful day.